In the frigid morning air of autumn 2006, police sirens shattered the quiet atmosphere in the suburbs of Zhengzhou, Henan Province, China. The embers of a burned-out car still smoldered, sending gray smoke coiling into the sky. Behind this horrific scene lay a story of toxic love turned tragic, where the boundary between love and hate became fragile, where power and ambition intertwined with shattered dreams. This case not only shook the Henan medical community, but also lifted the veil on the dark side of workplace relationships, where power imbalances created irreparable tragedies. The young woman in the video was named Shuang. Because the boyfriend committed a brutal murder, he was sentenced to death. With just 30 minutes left before Shuang would take her final steps to the execution ground, ending her life, fate showed its cruel irony. Instead of the tear-stained face of despair typically seen on those about to depart this world, Shuang beamed with joy upon hearing that her boyfriend, the perpetrator of the crime, had his death sentence commuted. In that moment between life and death, her boyfriend, through a reporter's message, still wanted to affirm his feelings. "Even now, I still truly like you." The scene, though tragic, carried a poignant beauty, as if Romeo and Juliet were being reenacted at the execution ground. But the question lingered in the minds of witnesses. What drove this couple to such extreme actions? The root of this tragedy began with a man with an astonishing background, Fang Weijiao. He was born into a poor rural family in the Wuzhou region of Henan Province in 1965. Despite his impoverished origins, through extraordinary effort, Weijiao rose above class barriers and achieved a social leap that many could only dream of. The first milestone in this remarkable journey came when he was 18, passing the grueling entrance examination to enter Henan Medical University, where his fate would be rewritten from scratch. At this prestigious institution, Weijiao was not just an ordinary student. His talent and diligence were quickly recognized through outstanding academic performance. After graduation, he was privileged to remain working at the university hospital. Not stopping there, Fang Weijiao continued to conquer academic heights by becoming a graduate student and obtaining a master's degree in medicine at the same institution. But this was only the beginning of a long journey, and no one could have predicted that this man with a brilliant academic record would become the central figure in a bloody murder case in the not-too-distant future. Weijiao's journey continued with rapid advancement. After earning his doctorate in hepatobiliary surgery, he didn't stop but went to study at prestigious Columbia University in the United States. 3 years later, he advanced further when accepted to Harvard for postdoctoral research in molecular medicine, the pinnacle of the medical field. With excellent professional skills, Weijiao worked at hospitals affiliated with Columbia and Harvard, receiving generous salaries. From a poor rural boy, he had become a living symbol of the education changes destiny narrative. His personal life seemed equally smooth. During his doctoral studies, he met and fell in love with a female medical student. They quickly progressed to marriage and had a child without any notable obstacles. Afterward, they both went to the United States to study, and just a few years later, his wife also obtained a U.S. medical license. The couple became the perfect pair with high IQs, high education, and high social status, earning the admiration of many around them. On the surface, they had everything one could dream of for a successful life. With their successful life in America, Fang Weijiao's family of 3 would likely have settled there permanently. But in 2003, news from home changed everything. Henan Medical University, his former school, had merged with Zhengzhou University. To attract talent, the school offered an extremely attractive package. If he returned to work as a special professor, he would not only receive a salary of hundreds of thousands each year, but also be given an apartment in the city center. With the belief that a foreign land can never compare to one's homeland, plus favorable development conditions in China, Weijiao decided to return. He declared his wish to contribute to his motherland and was determined to realize this intention. However, his wife disagreed with this decision and refused to bring their child back to China with him. Irreconcilable differences led to their divorce and separation. The story of the doctor willing to sacrifice family happiness, renounce American citizenship for patriotic love, was quickly published in Zhengzhou University magazine as a shining example. Many mainstream media outlets also reported on this story, making it an admirable tale for some time. However, the reality behind this touching story was completely different from what the press had praised. The truth was not as beautiful as its appearance, a detail that would be clarified later. Upon returning to China, Fang Weijiao was welcomed as a national treasure. Zhengzhou University particularly valued him, appointing him as a doctoral advisor and surgeon at the university hospital. In 2005, when the position of Human Resources Director at Zhengzhou University First Hospital became vacant, Weijiao competed for and won this position. This was no ordinary position in the hospital system. The HR director not only had a relatively easy job, but also had opportunities to earn many private gains beyond the official salary. With the power to decide position changes for most staff, Weijiao became someone no one in the hospital wanted to offend, similar to how patients try not to antagonize their doctors. Not long after Weijiao took office, fate arranged for him to meet Shuang, a young nurse who would change his life forever. From here, a sinful relationship began to form. Shuang was born in September 1983 in Zhengzhou, Henan. She also had an ordinary background like Weijiao in his early years, but wasn't blessed with the same outstanding talent. With an associate degree, she studied at the health school affiliated with Henan Medical University and later at Henan Workers' Medical Institute. After graduating in 2005 through a classmate's referral, she was hired at Zhengzhou University First Hospital, where Weijiao held HR management authority. However, her position was only temporary, without official status. Shuang didn't want to remain a temporary employee forever. However, times had changed. Since 1999, when universities simultaneously expanded their scales, the value of a university degree had significantly decreased. In the hospital environment, her associate degree was even ranked at the lowest level. Without high qualifications or supportive connections, her path to becoming a permanent employee seemed almost hopeless. The only consolation for Shuang was her job position, assistant to the HR director, a relatively comfortable job compared to other positions in the hospital, and especially the opportunity to work directly with Fang Weijiao, who held decision-making power over staffing. On February 26, 2006, an event pushed both their lives onto an irreversible path. Weijiao organized a birthday party, inviting all colleagues in the department to attend. As his assistant, Shuang was naturally present at the celebration. In Chinese drinking culture, forcing others to drink is a bad custom often criticized, but still widely practiced. Especially when a higher-ranking person pressures subordinates to drink, the subordinates rarely dare to refuse. Additionally, those wanting to make a good impression on superiors often proactively offer toasts to show respect and curry favor. It's unclear which case applied to Shuang, but after several rounds of drinks, she fell into a state of intoxication, her consciousness hazy, no longer in control of her actions. When the party ended, Shuang's memory became vague. She vaguely remembered being put into a car, and then completely lost all recollection. The next morning when she awoke, the scene before her eyes was shocking. She discovered herself naked in Weijiao's bedroom. The painful truth suddenly dawned. They had been intimate the night before. The world seemed to collapse before Shuang's eyes. Previously in her view, Weijiao had always been a respectable superior, professionally skilled, treating staff well, and especially someone quite upright. But now the saying, "You can know a person's face but not their heart," had never been more true. The normally serious department head could commit such a bestial act, taking advantage of her intoxicated state. Confused and frightened, Shuang quickly dressed, intending to quietly leave. By this time, Weijiao was completely sober. He repeatedly apologized and promised to compensate Shuang by helping her secure a permanent position at the hospital, something she had long desired. However, he also made it clear that this couldn't be implemented immediately and would require waiting for the right opportunity, because even as HR director, he couldn't single-handedly decide everything in the hospital. These sweet promises were actually just tactics to pacify Shuang. Deep down, Wei Zhao had no intention of fulfilling his promise. He just wanted to temporarily calm the situation and prevent the matter from being exposed, which would affect his current position. Shuang, partly out of respect and fear for her superior, partly wanting to use this opportunity to achieve her personal goals, chose to trust Wei Zhao and not report the incident, a decision she would later pay dearly for. In the days that followed, Wei Zhao did indeed take care of Shuang within his capabilities, both in work and personal life. However, there's always a price to pay. To receive these privileges, Shuang was forced to accept a shameful, unspoken agreement. She not only abandoned the idea of reporting to the police, but also maintained a secret relationship with Wei Zhao. Although deep down she utterly detested this relationship, she still forced herself to comply, all because she wanted to achieve her goal of securing a permanent position at the hospital. Later, reflecting on this experience, she frankly shared, "I didn't want everything to become nothing. Reality was too cruel." At that time in the HR department, I knew everyone who entered the hospital, wanting to find a job, had to suddenly spend money. Without someone above, you're basically nothing. People can slap you down to the bottom with one hit. Wanting to throw you out is just a matter of one sentence. However, in life, compromise doesn't always bring the expected rewards. Although the two tried to keep their relationship secret, intimate actions inevitably left traces. Before long, rumors about the special relationship between the HR director and a temporary staff member spread throughout the hospital. Fearing these rumors would seriously affect his career and image, Wei Zhao decided on a drastic measure, transferring Shuang out of the HR department, cutting off her frequent appearance by his side to extinguish the rumors. In July 2006, Shuang was transferred to work in the finance department. Right during this period, she discovered she was pregnant, and the father could only be Wei Zhao. Faced with this situation, she gave Wei Zhao two clear choices: either marry her or immediately resolve the staffing issue as promised. Faced with this ultimatum, Wei Zhao found himself in a difficult position. The first option, marriage, he completely didn't want to fulfill. The second option, resolving her permanent position immediately, he wasn't capable of accomplishing in a short time. Backed into a corner, Wei Zhao had to find a third way out. He informed Shuang that in the next month, the hospital would recruit a batch of nurses through personnel representatives. Those recruited would receive treatment equivalent to permanent staff, just without housing benefits. "Don't rush," Wei Zhao reassured. "Next month happens to have a quota for permanent transfers, which requires passing a public examination. But with me there, you're certain to be selected." However, he put forward a cruel condition. The prerequisite is that you must terminate the pregnancy. Otherwise, when the examination discovers premarital pregnancy, you'll definitely be disqualified. At that point, don't talk about permanent transfer. Even staying at the hospital would be a distant dream. Under Wei Zhao's pressure and persuasion, Shuang made a heartbreaking decision, agreeing to terminate the pregnancy. In her mind at that time, compared to an unformed life, her own future and career seemed much more important. To avoid meeting acquaintances and stirring up more unfavorable rumors, she went alone to a small hospital in a remote area to undergo the procedure. Wei Zhao did indeed fulfill part of his promise, taking Shuang to participate in the recruitment assessment. However, only after going through the entire process did she discover the harsh truth. This was still just temporary staff recruitment, not the permanent position she had hoped for. The recruitment took in as many as 149 nurses, but all only signed one-year contracts. This news left Shuang with complex emotions. On one hand, the permanent position she had long desired remained unresolved. On the other hand, it couldn't be denied that the treatment in her new position had improved significantly compared to before. However, along with the higher salary came a surge in workload. The position of nurse in the surgical department was not at all comfortable, like the administrative jobs she had done before. Day after day, exhausted to the point of collapse, after just a few days, Shuang couldn't bear it anymore. She decided to approach Wei Zhao, demanding to be transferred back to work in the HR or finance department. This request put Wei Zhao in an awkward position. The position in the finance department already had a replacement and couldn't be moved. As for the HR department, it was precisely because of concerns about unfavorable rumors that he had transferred Shuang elsewhere. Now, bringing her back after less than 2 months would be like admitting their improper relationship, wouldn't it? In this situation, Wei Jiao could only find ways to delay. He told Shuang that transferring jobs currently had some difficulties and asked her to wait patiently. When an opportunity arose, he would transfer her back. No matter how much fuss Shuang made, he just repeated empty promises with no intention of fulfilling them. The prolongation and continuous empty promises made Shuang increasingly dissatisfied. The feeling of being deceived, used, and then discarded burned more intensely in her heart each day. Fate sometimes has strange arrangements. In a chance encounter, Shuang met Wang Zijian, a schoolmate of her cousin. If Wei Jiao's thoughtless one-night action had planted a bomb in his life, then Wang Zijian's appearance was the fuse that activated that bomb. Wang Zijian was born in Yingyang City, Henan Province, 5 years younger than Shuang and at that time still just an 11th grade student. Despite the not insignificant age gap, they had a strange resonance of souls. They conversed well together, and gradually, feelings developed uncontrollably. Shuang was attracted by the sincerity and passion of this young man, something she couldn't find in Wei Jiao. As for Wang Zijian, he felt from this older woman a sense of being cared for and understood that he rarely found in girls his own age. This new relationship made Shuang even more determined to cut all ties with Wei Jiao. When sensing this intention, Wei Jiao couldn't hide his dissatisfaction. In his mind, helping her secure a permanent position might be difficult, but kicking her out of the hospital was all too simple. Wei Jiao quickly found an opportunity. According to labor contract law regulations, for contracts lasting from 1 to under 3 years, the probation period cannot exceed 2 months. Shuang had just worked in her new position for slightly over a month, still within the probation period. Without hesitation, Wei Jiao directly used his authority to terminate Shuang's employment relationship with the hospital, pushing her into unemployment without any warning. This cruel action ignited the conflict between them, pushing everything to a new height. Shuang, who had sacrificed so much for Wei Jiao's promises, was now discarded mercilessly, like an item that had lost its value. Wei Jiao's ruthless dismissal pushed the relationship between the two to the brink of complete collapse. Shuang felt utterly outraged by this inhumane treatment. The man who had taken advantage of her, made her pregnant, then forced her to have an abortion, now callously kicked her out of the hospital like discarding a useless object. However, Shuang found herself in a dilemma. If she still wanted to return to work at the hospital, she would have to bow before Wei Jiao, continuing to serve and please this big shot. Caught between the desire for stable employment and career prospects on one side, and deep disgust from the bottom of her heart on the other, Shuang was violently torn between these two extremes. During this crisis, Zijian, her young but perceptive boyfriend, noticed Shuang's unusual mental changes. After many inquiries, she finally confessed her painful past with Wei Jiao. At that time, she thought that after knowing these things, Zijian would become angry and leave her, as many other men might do in similar circumstances. But Zijian's reaction was completely beyond her expectations. Without a word of blame or judgment toward Shuang, the young man instead directed all his fury at Wei Jiao. With the characteristic hot temper of youth, upon hearing how the powerful man had exploited and bullied his girlfriend, Zijian became furiously angry. He swore to teach Wei Jiao an unforgettable lesson for what he had done to Shuang. This intense protection from Zijian deeply moved Shuang. Seeing Zijian's indignant expression, Shuang felt a bit of comfort in her heart. At least she wasn't facing a second heartless person in her life. As memories of the humiliations she had endured came flooding back, from Wei Jiao not fulfilling his promise of permanent employment to his cruel dismissal of her from the hospital, anger once again erupted within Shuang. In that fury, she made a reckless decision to join her boyfriend in exacting revenge on Wei Jiao, the man who had put on his clothes and turned away, abandoning her after exploiting her in every possible way. The revenge plan was quickly devised. Zijian bought an iron hammer shaped like a sheep and took a surgical knife from Shuang. With these tools, they prepared for their act of vengeance. At around 4 p.m. on September 30th, 2006, a fateful day was chosen. Shuang approached Wei Zhao's office, declaring that she wanted to meet him outside for a proper conversation. She deliberately spoke in a louder tone than normal, enough for surrounding colleagues to notice and become curious. This method worked perfectly. Wei Zhao, fearing that past events would be exposed to colleagues, reluctantly agreed to her request. Outside the hospital, Shuang cleverly introduced Wang Zijian as her cousin. Wei Zhao didn't suspect anything and agreed to let all three get into his Honda. This was a fatal mistake he would not have the chance to regret. After the car had left the hospital for a short distance, the real plan began. From the back seat, Wang Zijian suddenly pulled out the prepared surgical knife, holding it close to Wei Zhao's neck. With the sharp weapon pressed against his throat, Wei Zhao had no choice but to obey their command. Move to the passenger seat and let Shuang drive the car. She drove to a secluded area near Xindong, where there were no passers-by. After parking in the deserted location, the three began their negotiation, essentially an extortion, right in the car. Shuang made a clear demand. Wei Zhao must bring her back to work at the hospital and resolve the permanent position issue within 3 days. Wei Zhao, despite being in a dangerous situation, still couldn't contain his skeptical response. How is that possible? This answer ignited the escalation of the tense situation. The negotiation quickly turned into a fierce argument between the three. In the extremely tense atmosphere, Wang Zijian, with the hot temper of youth, lost control. He used the surgical knife to cut Wei Zhao's neck and right wrist, causing injuries but not yet fatal. Faced with the risk of losing his life, Wei Zhao suddenly erupted with strength from survival instinct, pushing Wang Zijian away and opening the car door, trying to escape from the scene. But fate wasn't on his side. Wei Zhao only ran a few steps before Wang Zijian caught up with him. Without hesitation, the young man used the iron hammer he had prepared, swinging hard at Wei Zhao's head, left arm, and several other positions on his body. The brutal blows killed him on the spot, blood staining a corner of the deserted road. At this moment, Shuang seemed to wake from a trance. The bloody scene before her eyes, Wei Zhao lying motionless in a pool of blood and Zijian beside him, still holding the bloody weapon, left her stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. The emotions in her heart were extremely complex: fear, regret, shock, and even a strange sense of relief, all tangled together into an inextricable mess. But what was done couldn't be undone. With survival instinct, the two decided not to destroy the body, but quickly dragged Wei Zhao's corpse into the car. They drove to a deserted road on the edge of Kuidong Village in Shenzhen City, a place they thought would be safe. There, they poured gasoline over the car along with Wei Zhao's body and the murder weapons, then set it on fire, hoping to erase all traces. But fate didn't stand on their side. Not long after leaving the scene, the burnt smell of gasoline and thick smoke from the burning car quickly attracted the attention of nearby residents. Noticing something unusual, they immediately called the police. Firefighters quickly arrived to extinguish the fire. When the flames were completely out, police discovered Wei Zhao's charred body inside the car. The case was immediately initiated. Investigators found blood traces left by the roadside at the initial crime scene. After conducting DNA tests, they confirmed the victim's identity as Fang Weizhao, the HR director at Zhengzhou University First Hospital. The pieces were quickly put together. Based on colleagues' statements about Weizhao leaving with Shuang that afternoon, along with surveillance camera footage from the hospital, police quickly narrowed down Shuang and a young man, later identified as Wang Zijian, as the main suspects in the case. 3 days after the crime, the couple's escape journey ended. Police arrested both at Zhengzhou Station as they were preparing to board a train to Xinjiang, a distant land where they hoped to start a new life. The unused tickets in their hands became evidence of their escape plan. After thorough investigation, on August 2, 2007, the trial court delivered its verdict. Both Shuang and Zijian were sentenced to death, with lifelong deprivation of political rights. The severe sentence reflected the seriousness of their crime. During the death sentence review phase, Shuang, with deep love for her young boyfriend, tried to overturn the case. She attempted to take all the blame, declaring that she had planned and carried out the murder of Wei Chao, while Zijian was just accidentally drawn in. However, this effort quickly fell apart when police reconstructed the crime scene. Based on the victim's wounds and forensic analysis, they clearly determined that Guo Shuang was lying to protect her lover. Although unable to save Zijian from his sentence, in the end, it was his youth that saved his life. Since Zijian was only 17 years old when committing the crime, not yet 18, the age of full criminal responsibility under Chinese law, his sentence was changed to death with a 2-year reprieve. And it was this good news that led to the emotional moment captured in the video. Guo Shuang, facing her own death but with a happy smile on her lips, walking toward the execution ground. For her, the fact that her lover would live, even in prison, was a great comfort in the final moments of her life. But this story doesn't end with Guo Shuang being led to the execution ground. A shocking truth was revealed after she was gone. The truth about Fang Weijiao, the man once praised by the press. It all started when Wang Zijian was ordered by the trial court to compensate the victim's family with 100,000 yuan, approximately $15,000. Due to his family's poor circumstances, he couldn't afford this amount. Therefore, the victim's family continued to submit a civil lawsuit for compensation. However, something unexpected happened. In the list of plaintiffs for this new lawsuit, a new name appeared: Fang Weijiao's wife. This appearance revealed a shocking truth. In fact, Weijiao and his wife had never divorced, as the press had reported. They were simply living separately in 2 different places, a common situation in families with someone working abroad. Not only that, Weijiao had never given up his good job in America or American citizenship due to patriotic love, as the story had been painted. The truth was, he never obtained American citizenship and was even facing the risk of having his green card revoked. The real reason forcing Weijiao to hastily return to China was much darker. During his time working at Harvard Medical School, he had been involved in a sexual harassment lawsuit. The victim, coincidentally, was also a young nurse, a pattern of behavior he later continued with Guo Shuang. When the investigation was ongoing, Weijiao hurriedly fled back to China, leaving his wife alone in the United States to face the consequences and handle all the troubles. Therefore, the image of a patriotic doctor, willing to give up everything to return home and serve his country, was actually just a story created to cover up a dark past. In reality, Weijiao's return to China was not due to patriotism, but an escape from legal consequences in the United States. Thus, the image of the devoted husband, talented doctor, and patriotic intellectual that Weijiao had carefully constructed, all were false. The harsh reality was much worse. A man who abused power to harass, deceive, and then flee responsibility. The case of Guo Shuang and Wang Zijian is not just a story of crime and punishment, but also a warning about the impacts of power and abuse, about how injustice can push people to extreme actions, and about the price paid for decisions made in anger. 3 lives were forever changed. One ended in a pool of blood, one ended on the execution ground, and one must live with the consequences for the rest of his life. Behind this bloody story are societal blind spots worth pondering, where power can be abused, where equal opportunities are not available to everyone, and where justice sometimes only comes after irreparable tragedies. And that's the case for today. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next video.